And what is happening, folks? Welcome to another episode, Unfiltered Bachelor. I'm your Unfiltered Bachelor, Blake Money. Blake Weather. How's everybody doing out in podcast land? Hopefully, everybody's preparing for the summer. I know in Austin it's a bit gloomy today, but it's always humid and it's always hot. So there's always that. But I hope everybody's excited for summer. It's my birthday month in July, so everybody just prepare your Amazon shopping list for me. Um, well, today I have a really awesome guest on. We're like so many of the guests that come on the podcast. I just meet people randomly through all of the social mediums throughout the world, and this guy is no different. He is the host of Make Love Easy, a mastermind for men. It's actually a group that I'm in, and he's been posting some like really, I think, awesome and encouraging stuff, and figured I'd have him on. It's Louis Brantmeyer. Louis, how you doing, man?
I'm great. Honored to be here.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. For people not familiar with you or what you do, or the Make Love Easy, like the group, sort of give a quick like synopsis of who you are. Like, I always say it's like the back of like when you rent the movie at Blockbuster. It's like, what's this movie about? Like, who's this person about?
For sure. I mean, other than this for our viewers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can say that this is a long personal journey. My first memory in life was watching Star Trek on TV. My second was making out with a older blonde girl at daycare. And
Oh, wow. All right.
yeah, it was somewhere between 3 and 7 years old. I'm guessing probably upwards closer to 7. But yeah, I've been committed to thriving in love, sex, dating, intimacy, and relationships for as long as I can remember. And
Mm-hmm.
the movement is born of a commitment to helping men to do that, like that thriving, that enjoying all of what they truly desire from a place of authenticity, from a place of ease, alignment, have it be purpose driven, and have it be holistically healthy for their entire life. Not just like overextending in the direction of like social skills or even pickup artistry, or not just tantra and like learning the mechanics of sex, but all of it together to be the best man that you can be.
I really like that approach. So to give and a lot of people who tuned in sort of know my background, but when I think it was probably like 19 or 20, it was the first time I was ever, I think, introduced, I think much like a lot of people, right, to the pickup artist community, right? Much with the pickup, for those that remember VH1 having the pickup artists on
Agree.
TV, and the first season being filmed here in Austin. It was, I think that was sort of the introduction to that world for a lot of people. I know it was for me because I had a friend tell me, he's like, oh, they're on season 2. And I think at the time they were in Scottsdale, Arizona. But that was my first time like being introduced to that world and like hearing what is a pickup artist and what is this mystery character? What is this whole background? And I remember really digging into finding the Texas PUA Lounge, which is probably, I don't know if it's still around, but becoming a part of that before I was 21 and like going all in, like with learning from Neil Strauss had all the DVDs and the instructionals, and David D'Angelo and Mystery had his own pickups. It was everywhere, right? Tyler Durden, like, again, for people that like know, they're like shaking their head yes. They're like, oh yeah, I remember all that. And so that was like sort of my first introduction into dabbling to that world. And so what I really love is something that I've been saying a lot on this podcast, which is a lot of that for me looking back felt very like, we'll teach you tips and we'll teach you tricks, but it never fixed, and I never fixed it myself until after doing this podcast and going to therapy and digging in on the, like, I guess people call it the shadow work or the sort of the inner work or the inner game. There's lots of terminologies for it, but it's essentially fixing and healing those pieces that are inside that make a longer lasting effect, that where you're like, oh, once these pieces are better, everything else just sort of falls into place. when it comes to confidence, when it comes to feeling empowered, when it comes to understanding yourself. And then when you start to see like the realm of dating and relationships, it just, I don't know, it falls in line more. So I think that's a long story. All that to say, I do like the approach that you're taking when it comes to sort of, I think, combining all those things together.
Well, thank you. It's born of a lot of pain, actually. A great deal of suffering, because I was schooled in old school pickup. I picked up the game, penetrating the scene, pickup artists. I fell in love with that. I was like, I'm a socially awkward nerd at the end of my high school career,
Right.
Sexually repressed and Catholic, and like hadn't had a date or sex up to like 17 years and 364 days. That's a fun story, how I lost my virginity. We won't necessarily go into it here. But yeah, I found that the tools themselves alienated me from myself, from my highest expression of my authenticity. So I was doing things in order to get results, and I could get results like get laid, get a date, get a relationship. But then there was always a moment where I'd have to take the mask off, and I'd be like, do you like the real me? Do you want what's actually going on here? Because tools, techniques, technologies can't make up for a lack of real self-esteem.
Right.
Internal work or inner game work done. So yeah, I agree with you. It's important to not just give people tips and techniques, but to address the deepest level. And to go out on a limb here with that, what's interesting is most of the world, when it comes to coaching and also when it comes to dating and relating, is teaching people, hey, you have something with you that you need to fix. Whereas in Make Love Easy, we have a very different perspective. You were born worthy, you were born capable, you were born good enough. You are not broken. There's nothing wrong with you, and you don't need to do anything to fix yourself. Sure, there may be a harmonization between the different parts of you, the wounded child, the protector controller, the perfectionist, that gets done. But primarily, once that's done, the road is paved for you to take new actions and put your focus in a new space on new things. And sure, you'll be taking new actions. Sure, you'll be skilling up. But it's the difference between reinforcing a wounded identity that's looking for the next program or the next teacher or the next book or the next technique.
Okay. Yeah.
Add to its, yeah. And most people, they're taking tools and techniques and workshops and trainings, and they're reinforcing their woundedness through doing more trainings. Because what kind of person needs to do a bunch of trainings? Well, someone who has something they need to fix about themselves. So there is inner game work to be done.
Yes.
Make Love Easy, it's very different than the standard, like, well, let's get you into therapy, let's fix you. Does that make sense?
It does. And I was going to ask, what is the difference, right? Like, is it not encouraged? It is encouraged, like, to do mental and emotional work as far as like therapy, counseling, whatever sort of, fill in the blank with whatever sort of mental health precautionary measures somebody's taking. Like, what would be the different approach that y'all would? Because here's the thing. I like the empowerment aspect of it. It's like, bro, you're not all you're continuously looking for an answer. It's like to fill in this void of like being a broken person. So I do think that there is a problem there of like, I think hyping up the encouragement of like, listen, without it's like buying, whatever a new shoes or whatever. It's like without our shoes, like you're really like your closet's missing something. I think that same approach is taken to a lot of stuff as far as sales tactics or salesman tactics. Now, when I look back at like pickup artist people or people that I've never had on the show that are like, hey, I'm a dating coach or I'm a relationship coach or whatever. Because I don't feel like that approach is genuine. So I will agree with you. Like, I think like the empowering people to do that, but how is your approach different, or is therapy like that? Is that encouraged at all with y'all's guys' approach to helping heal those parts of yourself?
Yeah, so this is a good question. I'm never going to down anybody who's using any tool or technique to work on themselves in search of attaining a better result or a better goal. I'm just going to say that most self-development, most trainings and teachers are coping at best.
Hmm.
When you look at organizations like Landmark Worldwide or AA with Alcoholics Anonymous, and you look at the actual statistics and success rates, my understanding is that they're very low. The number of people who actually get their results versus those who swear by it and continue to work through it and try to work on it. So fundamentally, what we're talking about is a difference in orientation. There's the problem orientation, and then there's the creative orientation. So the problem orientation is there's something wrong with me, or there's something wrong out here in the world that I have to fix.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we resist persists. And beyond that, what we resist actually owns us. The ego is fundamentally a response to an experience of not being good enough, not being capable, whatever. The ego's the baby crying. Sometimes you got to let the baby cry. It's always going to be there. There's always going to be that part of you that when you were young, thought you didn't get enough attention from mom or didn't get the validation you wanted from dad, and came up with the strategy that individualized you. And this is speaking to anybody, right? Not you.
Right. Absolutely.
And the strategy itself, it's like the ego is born out of that felt need to be different or be better or be stronger. And we can't fix that. We're not meant to try. When we try, we reinforce it. So you get people who, and I look at past clients of mine who they do every training and they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to become a really successful coach in business. This is my other business that I do, is I help coaches scale to 6 figures.
Nice.
Or they do every training that they can find to get a relationship or get a girlfriend. And there's a fundamental error or mistake that there's something wrong or there's something broken. There's something needing to fix. There's always going to be a part of you that thinks that's deluded by that illusion. And instead, we get people out of that. We put them into the creative orientation. The creative orientation says, what do you want to create purely because it feels good to do so? Not because doing so will make you feel better, like ultimately at the level of identity. Most people are an oscillating, wounded identity trying to fix itself through the acquisition of a partner, of sex, of dates, of a business, whatever it is. And at the other side of the rainbow, you're still stuck with yourself.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So if you simply get into your heart, activate your heart, come from that part of you, that deepest knowing, intuitive, already whole part of you. We sometimes talk about spirituality, the soul level version of you inside the movement. Once you're there, you're going to create something purely because it feels good. You're going to create in a way that feels good to you. And you're not going to create in order to fix a wound or heal a wound. You're going to be creating from your wholeness. As Neil Strauss says in his sequel book, The Truth, an uncomfortable book about relationships, which I've got something to say about his books and his work in a moment.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I know I'm sort of hogging the microphone. Thanks for
You're good.
So he says, make sure that the decision you make about what relationship style to engage in, monogamy versus polyamory or single versus partner, whatever, that it's based on your wholeness and not on a wound. And what most personal development systems do is they reinforce someone's woundedness, and they're never coming from their wholeness. Whereas what we do is we start from your wholeness. We clean up what's in the way of you acting from there. We put your focus on where you would focus your attention and what actions you would take if you were already whole. And then what you create tends to be more long-lasting, more fulfilling, more enjoyable. And, I trained with one of the best authenticity-based dating and relationship coaches here in Austin. And even his system, his tools, still didn't address this challenge fundamentally. So people were using the tools to express themselves, to create great social dynamics, create great sex, but they were dysfunctional.
Right.
They were dysfunctional. And even for me, I was in my Casanova period. I went from clueless, socially awkward, autistic, and anxious growing up to Casanova to now aspiring to be conscious, aspiring to be emotionally, spiritually, socially intelligent to the highest degree, with my wholeness being the place that I come from. So and the thing to say about The Truth, and then I'll hand the ball up. Neil Strauss himself is also oscillating. You can see this in like how he creates this version of him through the tools and technologies in the game to be able to create results. But then what he realizes is, oh, okay, now that I'm able to have a lot of sex, I want a girlfriend. He gets with his girlfriend. And the whole book, The Truth, is based on this experience where he cheats on his girlfriend. He's like, why the fuck did I do that? Because his identity, his ego was still oscillating. It was still acting from his woundedness. And then he spends that whole book healing himself. So he loves himself. And then he gets married. And guess what happens? 2 or 3 years after the book gets released and after he's had a child, he divorces that woman. He was still in oscillation. This is the poster child for the pickup community.
Whoa, yeah.
He sought to redeem himself through this second book. And even then, you look at what's publicly available about him as a human being. Like, and I love Neil Strauss. He was my first and best coach. So that's why Make Love Easy exists, because nobody else is talking about this. And if more people would talk about it, we could do the work to shift and release the old identity, put your focus on the new one, step into that, and create from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do. There's a lot to take in, but I do like starting off with Neil Strauss. I do like, you're like, well, here's the dichotomy of like a guy who's stepping into this, like thinking he's stepping into his best life and still having problematic tendencies with moving forward on that same pathway. And it's often when I talk about people who've never heard of the game, right? I've got friends, they know I do the podcast, and so we have a lot of these talks, but I describe the book, The Game. I'm like, have you ever heard the book, The Game? I'm like, no, what's The Game? I'm like, oh my God, it's this book, Neil Strauss, writer for Rolling Stone, yada, yada. But when I describe the part of I'm like, he's following this main PUA, pickup artist guy named Mystery. And Mystery's deal is like, he can pick up any girl in the world. He can teach guys to pick up many women. But the problem in the book, and Neil points this out, is that, and this is the problem that when I look back and look at pickup stuff, it's like, it doesn't teach you to keep a girlfriend. It doesn't teach you to keep those relationships, because the relationship with yourself is never fully addressed. It's never fully healed. It's never fully like taken into account. So when that's not, then you have these problematic tendencies where you're like, well, I have this I'm uber talented in this one area. I'm very performative in this one area, but I'm still lacking in this other area. And there's nothing within my wheelhouse or within my knowledge base that I'm doing, thinking, or acting on that's helping that whole other area. And that's always what I think about. So like hearing you describe, I'm like, it's not exactly a 1-for-1, but it like parallels like Neil Strauss's own, life in the way that you're describing it. You know what I mean? And that for me was always, again, like I was in the space for a little bit. It was nice while it lasted. I think I still have like going through like my old boxes. I'm like, oh, I printed out all these like the cube test and the, like these mystery it was such a crazy time, but like there's some really fun stuff I think to be learned. Like I don't mean to sit here and like crap all over that space, because I think like there's a place for everything. There's like you can make anything and work anything, but when you're operating from a better place, it's like one of the things I've found. I've gone to therapy for the last 2.5 years. I've had this podcast for 4, and whereas it started off as more of like a dating podcast and me having friends on, we talk about dates or we talk about relationships, yada, yada. It turned into more, and I look back on it, this has now been a relating through relationships podcast. This has now been a healing podcast. This has now been a space where we're like, hey man, here's some issues that like men, people, we're all facing, and like nobody's really having these conversations and like digging into it in the way that it needs to be addressed, without, I think, people being like, follow my Instagram page, or like using it as sort of, I don't know, some sort of servicing mechanism to build a following, but actually having authentic conversations about these things. And I think that there's so many people that are, and that are helping people step into it authentically, and helping people step into it from a place of, I think the word, I had another coach on not too long, Crystal Moritz, just operating from that place of love, right? Like true love. And when you're doing that, like, how do you learn that? There's so many methods, so many ways, like, but when you step into that, then your decision making doesn't come from, it's not fear-based, it's not emotion, based of like conditional emotion based, right? It's like actually wanting to do something because you're doing it. You feel more empowered to do it. You feel more confident in yourself to do it. You feel just, again, like love to be able to make a decision to do something without all the rest taking precedence in your mind.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a big long speech, but yeah.
Oh, I mean, so for us, right? We know that, this is one of our tenets, one of our beliefs inside of the movement.
Mhm.
Is, love is the most attractive place to come from.
Hmm.
Compassion and self-love, the sensitivity. And I'm not saying necessarily be a bleeding heart, like just crumbling doormat. Like, I mean, I cry at movies. I cry to my girlfriend all the time, but from an overwhelm of love,
Mhm.
right? And love can be a kind of strength. So it's a balance, a harmonious balance between the masculine polarity and the feminine polarity inside of, and harmonized inside of a man's body and soul, being able to
Right.
express from both sides. And like, yeah, if love is actually easy, having love is actually easy, finding love is actually easy, keeping love is actually easy. It's just we're not trained, and
Yeah.
there don't exist many good trainings, and so that's part of why we're here, to be that good training. So
That's beautiful, man. What would you say, like one of the more helpful things that you've learned that you've helped people with, just to like eye open? I mean, again, I don't mean to take all the cheese out y'all's macaroni, but like what
yeah.
has been one of the like tips where you're like, this is an obvious thing, and either one, we talk about it here in great length, or two, like it's something that like it's easy to think about.
So just riffing on love, for
Mm-hmm.
example, love doesn't come from people; it comes through people when you tune to it. And where do we tune to it? Inside of ourselves first. But literally, there's also a metaphysical experience. Like, we manifest our reality with our subconscious beliefs. Manifest does not mean to create as much as to make obvious what is already there. Who we
Mm.
believe we are for ourselves shows up in our partners. Abuse doesn't come from people; it comes through people when we're tuned to it. And our default setting, sometimes based on trauma and programming, is to be tuned to abuse, expecting, waiting for, even demanding from our partners that they treat us in ways that don't work,
Mm.
be it in a short-term sexual dalliance or a long-term life partnership. And this is, so there's more. We don't lead with this. Usually, we lead with the becoming a social rock star, because that's still what men think they need. That's what they want the most. Is like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I want to get laid more. I want to be a social wizard. Like, okay, fine, we can tune that in, but the deeper work will make you not even need that stuff, because you'll be
Right.
showing up living your purpose. You'll be showing up living your highest alignment and health and vitality and energy, and you'll magnetize whoever's most meant to be with you, without you even necessarily having to set foot in clubs or bars or swipe in it incessantly. Like, that's been my experience over the past 5 years. I've manifested or created through mostly visualization and very little action out here in the world, my past 4 relationship partners and several sexual partners. So like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm very leaned back. I'm very optimized. Like, why take more action than is necessary? I don't fucking go to bars and clubs. I don't go on the apps. I don't go on the dating sites. I do what feels good to me, that's fun for me, and meet people who share my values. And with the slightest bit of social nuance and expression, because of all the internal work I've done, because of the wholeness that I'm coming from on the planet, because I'm standing and living my purpose, it's easy. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what it was meant to be. I think that's kind of the divine harmony and the order of things. It's just, it's easy to sell us as a culture. It's easy to sell us on the belief that we're not good enough, we're broken, we need to be fixed through tools and techniques, we need to be better at dating, we need to be having more sex, all
Yeah.
of it. So yeah.
When did you start with this path of yeah? I don't know if this is this like your company, Make Love Easy? You and Artemis is
Yeah.
this is y'all's sort of brainchild. When did this idea formulate? When did this start? When was this for you like clicking?
Yeah, so Make Love Easy started in existence right after I was trained by Steve Maeda in 2015, and
First of all, shout outs to Steve Maeda.
like
Big
Topo, huh?
He's a big friend of like a friend of mine, big friend of the show. He's been on multiple times. Really enjoy that guy. Yeah, just a big fan of his.
Well, tell him I'd love to reconnect next time you hear from him. I love that man too. He's been hard to get a hold of since he started Austin's Men's Development, in my experience. So
yeah, I mean, I met him in, not to cut you off, but I met him in 2019, and I had actually met him in 2009, 10 years before, when he did a public speaking event for the Texas pickup community here in Austin. I guess they hired him to come out, and he was going by Red Mole or whatever at the time.
Yeah.
And so he came out, and I met him years ago. So then when I saw him, I was like looking for new people to like have on the podcast, and they see this dude, see him on YouTube. I see his Facebook stuff. I'm like, why does this guy look familiar? And I go looking through his things. And I'm like, Red Mole, I know this dude. Like, I met him years ago.
Yeah.
And so we just sort of formulated a great, just a good friendship, man. Like, I'm not gonna say like we're best of friends and we know each other's favorite color, but like every time we come on, like it feels like two old friends. Like, just like, how you been? I'm like, what are we talking about today? So I've just had nothing but great experiences with that dude.
Oh man, yeah, I did his the Sexual Life program 3 times in a row.
Oh wow! All right.
Yeah, I did his camps, and then he assigned me and several other men who came through that crop to start creating content within the community. And that was where I got the idea that I wanted to be a dating relationship coach specifically, but I didn't know the business side. And I also had blocks to full self-expression, fear of being in public, and I solved those. Like, I'll tell you my story real quick.
Okay. Yeah.
Back to here, because it was quite a journey to come back to being a dating and relationship coach. It's about 7 years. And I didn't know how to create clients. I didn't know marketing, sales, or business really well on the side of building a coaching business. But what I discovered was that I loved creating events, helping coaches to create clients, which was ironic because I could do he can help others, but not himself. Because I wasn't mature enough as a coach, and I wasn't mature enough like in my messaging. I wasn't mature enough in all these aspects. So I was doing events called Empowering Austin Now, day-long premium quality retreat style summits where I would bring in speakers from all around Texas and the country as they were available to speak on conscious entrepreneurship, relationships, sex and intimacy. And I fell so in love with that I put the business by the wayside. And then COVID happened, which killed live events.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was doing DoorDasher for a month until my intuition gave me like, hey, you've been helping some people to sell online through these events. Do that full time. So I went and got some mad coaching, spent lots of money on becoming skilled in organic marketing and tools and tactics in that realm to help coaches scale to 6 figures. Now, I was in that business, Speak Powerfully Now, and I still am, like I still have a foot in that business for years before I finally admitted to myself, I was like, you know what? I've always cared more about dating and relationships. I think I know enough about the business side. Now it's time to go back.
Okay.
And I'd had all these adventures and all this chaotic shit happen in the interim, like in the Steve time and now, to where I was like, yeah, I can definitely help people with this. And I'm mature in this. Like, it's not just a matter of me repurposing a mixture of all that I learned from Neil Strauss, Ross Jeffries, Steve Maeda, and my own blundering and stumbling. Like, it was the inner game. It was the emotional intelligence, the spiritual intelligence, the stuff that nobody in those realms is teaching. And then finally, the full fruition of this thing came last year when the relationship with my high school sweetheart. So this was the coolest, craziest thing.
Okay.
After 15 years, like Hurricane Katrina destroyed my home city, New Orleans, sent me to a boarding school for smart people, Louisiana School for Math, Science, and the Arts, We had a short bus, so I don't know how smart we were. But I always like to joke about that. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
I was in love with this woman. She had a crush on the teacher, was dating someone else, referred to our time together in senior year in physics class as me drooling and staring at her. And she would have nothing of it. She had a last name that ended in B. We graduated together that day. I was just like, all right, I guess I'll never see her again.
Right.
So I spent the next decade developing social skill, emotional skill, spiritual know-how to some extent.
Oh.
And I put up a vision board 2020. It was around October. Just got done with some coaching from a relationship coach who helped me release some of those woundings and deep patterns. And little did I know, this woman, it actually gets crazier than this. I started coaching my first high ticket, $5,000 business client a month or two before. And the thing she got from the event, from working with me, that she loved the most was this Awaken Life Live event that I invited her to. And it was from somebody else's organization. She invited her friend Jan, who the week before I met my high school crush again, after 15 years of not seeing her, my high school crush was praying hey, God, I'm going to fucking kill myself unless I get tools to help me. So Jan invites her to this event that she only knows about because of her connection with Tammy, connection with me. And my high school crush is at this event getting the very tools she needs to pull herself out of a painful depression and being suicidal. And I spot her and I'm like, oh my God, it's her.
Wow. So, Louis, your life is a rom-com so far. Keep going though.
Well, that's where the book comes in. I literally it was more a tragic comedy than just a rom-com.
We'll take it. We'll take what we can get. Yeah.
So we got connected. She was 700 miles away, but we started dating. It was this beautiful adventure relationship. It was spiritually nourishing, sexually thrilling. I still dream about her. I still love her. But what happened was, after 18 months of us being together, sometimes on and off, some of the patterns that we were unresourced to address in ourselves, because we were both highly trained, skilled coaches and healers by that point, there were still dark corners of the shadows in our souls that we just couldn't handle, and especially couldn't handle together. So what ended up being the first chapter in my book, The Velociraptor Cataclysm, is when we got into this just horrific fight. We were very mean and just rude and disrespectful, and it blew out into all proportion to this dramatic thing. And I vowed that night, traveling home from another state where I'd gone to visit her, that I will complete the internal work to have my next relationship be my best and the last relationship I ever need to have. Because I had done so much internal work by that point. And that's where Artemis enters in, because this was last year. And so I manifested, I created the exact teacher to give me this new perspective, because all of what I had done previously was oscillation, was a wounded ego feeding itself and reinforcing the problem that it thought that it was, through taking on a new tool or taking on a new training. And finally we stepped into okay, here's the new identity. And then within 3 months, I created a new relationship with my partner, Sarah, who I love, I don't think we've ever fought. And it's strange. We're 10, maybe 11 months in of being connected, and there've been misunderstandings.
Right.
There've been miscommunications, but it's conflict free and it's easy. So I embody the message now in a way that I definitely didn't when I was with the previous partner. Now, the previous partner, that whole relationship, I learned so much. There's no such thing as failure. There's only feedback. There's no such thing as loss. There's just, how do I choose to take this and make growth happen from it? So that became a book, a 360-page transformational romance novel. It's been referred to as a coaching program in a memoir. And it's called The Treasure of Souls Touching, a Hurricane, a Pandemic, and a Stolen Car. Because her car was stolen near the beginning of the partnership. It wasn't by me. It was in very crazy shit. And that's slated for release, pending a couple very important edits, Q4 of this year. The manuscript is already complete. I've shared it. People call it page turning and compelling. And it's like my soul bleeding after the partnership ended. Like with the breakup and recovery from everything that happened. And as I look back, I know that I created that because that was subconsciously most meant to next happen in my life to my soul as part of my dharma and my life's purpose. If I hadn't had that experience of that kind of pain, that kind of formative, like, sure, I cared about all this stuff, but I hadn't had it like inscribed in the very depths of my being that no, I'm done with this. And I posted on Facebook, I was like, who's ready to join me in completing the internal work? Not just wanting to create another girlfriend,
right?
Wanting to create another sex partner, but wanting to finish it so that you can rest content inside of a love that never leaves, and a love that is easy and nourishing and authentic and thrilling. And so anyway, thanks for the time on the soap. That's the core of the movement right there.
I love it. I think I think we all have a story on why we're doing something, whatever path we're on. And especially when I have a podcast, right? You have a whole instructional program designed to help men and so much more. You are in a position to help coach people. We all have like the story behind the story of what set off the trigger, that set off the thing that led us down the pathway while we're walking and took this certain route. And I think it's always fun to hear people's stories, but all of them are beautiful in their own sense. Because you're like, whoa, I think it's going to go this way and it's going to go this whole another way. And then it's sometimes they're so just like, I don't know, inspirational and adventurous. Like you write a book about it or you start a podcast because of it. Like one of the two, right? Like you do a whole bunch of, you could do whatever it is to let that creativeness like flow out, come out. And like, I always like say like, hopefully help people. Because like, for me, that's such an integral part of like why I do what I do is like to help people, because like I would have loved somebody to help me in the way that like I look back to myself, and maybe you do this. I look back at myself 2.5 years ago, I'm like, bro, like me now compared to me then, like first of all, we're just two different people, but like I'd kick the shit out of myself emotionally and mentally. Like I'm just so light years away, like from where that person or who that person was. Mm-hmm. They did some right things. They did some wrong things, but we do a lot less wrong things because of, we're just different. But you got to have both to have those experiences in the first place and take those pathways in the first. You got to kind of appreciate it all. So yeah, it's a beautiful story that you have, man. And as in part of that, and I think one thing that I hear a sort of a sense of, and maybe you can help clarify this. There seems to be this sense of like spiritualism that I don't hear. Like I hear a lot from like coaches on the low, or like people on the low, and like everybody sort of has their semblance of spiritualism and a relationship to something beyond. But is that a part of like what is added into perhaps your approach with this, your course? Because if it is, I think that's really cool, because like for some people, I think you were describing it as like a lot of people, they just take like, okay, well, here's what this one famous relationship coach did or dating coach did, and here's what another one did. And let me just sort of combobble it into this cookbook of like pickup artistry, where for me, and when I describe it, it's like, it's always like sort of on it's superficial level stuff. It never gets at the core of like any morals, values, ethics, or like how I look at myself, how I feel about myself. And I'll say like I'm all about healing myself, because I'm a proponent of like, I don't think like every part of you is broken, but I do think there are pieces where like we can make those pieces better. I like to use the word like improve upon, because like I never want to like make somebody, you never want to make somebody feel bad, and let alone yourself. You're like, man, I'm a broken person, and like I'm just like tethered, and like there's not a whole bunch of hope. Like I try to use a lot of, I think, using hopeful language, the words that come out of your mouth, like they're powerful because you keep repeating these things to yourself, or you keep believing these things in yourself, or you say these things, and it just dictates perspective a certain way. I like to use the terminology of like improving. Like you can always improve upon something, like if it needs it or not. Like you could improve upon a number of things, but I do think that there are a lot of pieces of people's lives that require improving upon to not just make themselves better, or but like also it will bleed out to make relationships, not just in the like romantic, but just relationships with people better. And
Mhm.
when you do that, it bleeds into the romantic aspect of having better romantic relationships in that aspect.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd say everything is relationship.
Yeah,
Like if you look at
I
wealth,
like that.
happiness, um, spirituality is much easier in connection, in community, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
I'll say when it comes to our higher level programs, we lean into the spirituality much more. Like our
Okay.
year, we pro- there's a lot. There's a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of conversation to have there about like how do you determine a spiritual path and what does that look like at a fundamental level. I believe and have observed what appears to be solid evidence to suggest, and this is coming from when I was growing up. I was broke, ignorant, blackout drunk atheist philosophy student, arrogant as all hell, beyond the evidence of my senses. And I went through a period of eat, drink, be merry, and be a nihilist and hate your life and be suicidal because, like, what's the point? There's no point. We're making it up. We're trying to forget that we made it up. Oh, fuck. And
Right.
it was only because the most successful entrepreneurs that I could find, people who have real world, obvious, practical, pragmatic success and skills, because they started offering me things like Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender by Dr. David Hawkins, or
Hmm.
the work of Abraham Hicks and metaphysics and emotional intelligence and like feel
Hmm.
your feelings and listen to your intuition.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was where I started to take notice. And when I did, my results actually improved in fucking business.
Wow.
Now I've actually also applied them to dating and relating. And so like when somebody's got all those things dialed in, like they're a machine. They're magic for manifesting and creating their good. So yeah, we lean heavy into the spirituality. We characterize it as living your purpose. And if you
Hmm.
are a spiritual being having a human experience rather than a human being having an ayahuasca experience, then you're here to do more than just use another person to jerk off, feel less lonely, and approve and validate your ego. Like
Absolutely.
that's what most people are using relationships and sex for. So like you're here to co-create something and to make something happen in the world that didn't happen before, and to do your dharma and be a gift and add value in some way. Like that's my belief. Now most people don't attain that level of consciousness, or they only they attain some version of it.
Hmm.
And like if you're living your purpose, you're magnetic for your good because you're in your lane, not just hooked up to a source of love that goes beyond human egos, not just experiencing the vivid, vibrant, vital, alive, like psychedelic taste of love without
Hmm.
having to do psychedelics that fuck up your brain and leave in your body. One of my favorite psychedelic teachers, he died of liver cancer. I was like, what? Fuck, I guess that makes sense. He put all these untested chemicals in his body that his liver couldn't clean out. So anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. That's my secret third business is make life psychedelic, is
Okay.
access and activate your fullest potential and high performance through being psychedelic without taking psychedelics, through things like breath work and deep body work and all kinds of cool shit. And that's coming down the pipeline, but we'll put a bookmark on that.
I like that a lot. I very much got into meditation over the last 2 years. And when I say, but it's a lot of breath work. It's like just a lot of focus and breath work. Like when I feel like I feel like if you say the word spiritualism, or like I say the word meditation, I think people like have like this like a little out there, a little woo woo, but it's like when I break it down to my friends, I'm like, it's just like focusing. I like put on some like meditation music, or like even the sound of waterfalls, and I'll just like breathe And the way I describe it, and this has been sort of elemental, I think, in my day-to-day function over the last 2 years, is I don't know. I mean, the way I've described it is downloading, like sort of just downloading everything
Yep.
off of this CPU that's your brain, just downloading it, hitting that quick, like that reset, and then like you don't need a lot of time, like 20, 25 minutes. Like literally just did it right before this podcast. I felt so refreshed after the day, needed all of it. It was lovely. And I think I just put some like waterfall sounds on and just breathe and just like, and you hit these places. I'm like, I don't know. I've described to people, I'm like, you hit these places where you're just like, once you get past the barrier of thought, and now I'm getting real woo. So people feel free to fast forward 5 minutes. But like once you get past this like barrier of like all your thoughts, because you do think, you close your eyes, you think, you can't help it, But there is a way to get past the barrier where you're just like, all right, I'm existing. Like it feels like I'm here. I'm in a sense of where I am just being. And it's one of the most like calming things. It's a space that I need to hit to be able to just like, I would say continue with like whatever I'm doing in life. But like sometimes I think a lot of time it's just like hitting that space throughout the day to just be like, no, everything's good. Like everything's calm. Everything is, and even if it's not, like it is the way that it's supposed to be. And like what I'm all saying, being at peace with a lot of everything and finding that semblance of peace. Because when you operate from that place, like there's not a whole bunch that like bothers you. Like you see the things, but you're just like, yeah, that's cool. Anyways, I'm on my own journey to do this thing. So like, that's where my focus is. But there's so much distractions and there's so much misinformation. There's so much like stigma. There's so much, I don't know, in the barriers, in the way of like people, I think normally doing that or normalizing that. You normalize slowing down. People are like, I don't know about this, but you normalize speeding up. Like, hey, we've got TikTok, we've got, Netflix, we've got, bro, people all about this.
Yep.
It's just funny.
Yeah, it's interesting because like as you're talking, right, meditation is front and center, and the practice and the physiological, the cognitive, the emotional benefits of meditation, they're obvious and well documented. I mean, like anybody everywhere could take that practice up. And when I talk about spirituality, I like to call it the woo that works, energy, empathy.
All right.
Spirituality and intuition, they're all of a piece for me, that they improve performance and fulfillment in ways that the mainstream didn't teach us and that we look askew on. I wonder why. Like most relations, 40% of marriages end in divorce, 25% of men cheat on their wives. So people are not taught to do relationship. Maybe there are things we just don't know, spaces we should shine our light onto and explore and start to investigate that will actually make us healthier. And the healthiest relationships I've seen have, for better or for worse, a spiritual core to them, a context for them, a purpose for them beyond just we're going to jerk each other off as egos or sexual objects. I mean, so, and most people are codependent. Most people are treating each other as like hero, victim, villain in order to rescue them, to get rescued from feeling unlovable or incapable or whatever. And I'm done with that. That's like boring. I'm over that.
Yes.
A bunch of relationships of suffering through that to realize, oh, this is what's going on. Here's how do we stop it? So anyway,
in that sense, I think that's a great sort of segue into the next thing. Like, and it's something I'm curious about. Like in that sense, like there's obvious core wounds that people walk around with. And like, so again, I go back to the original, like a topic long time ago about like therapy and bringing those, like, I think bringing those helpful tools in, like whichever way you choose to get there, absolutely fine. Like, I think for the longest time I was like, therapy is therapy. And like, oh my God, everybody should do it. Even though like I was one of those people that was like encouraged to go. And like, I was just like, no, I was one of those people who were like, I have a podcast, but if I didn't have a podcast, I'd probably need to go to therapy. Ha ha ha. You know what I mean? Like I was one of those people, but I remember the minute I went, and and I think for me, I had a very unique experience with that people, for the most part, at least that I've spoke with, they're not always fully open. They're not always fully vulnerable. But it was no different. Having a therapy session was no different than doing an episode of a podcast. And it was like, how real do I need to get? And also too, like, I'm able to identify like, hey, like, I've read these books. I, learned attachment theory, and I know all the, childhood wounds. I've read books like, like going in, and I was able to go in with all these tools, and it only helped propel the growth that I had sooner rather than later. With all that in mind, right? Like, whichever way it takes to get you to and through the mental, hurdles that people have, there's still acknowledgement, I guess, in your course, or like in maybe in your own experience of like, there's core wounds. There is like a certain amount of like healing that does need to be done. Correct.
So
or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I feel good about that.
Yeah, okay.
It depends on what we define as healing. So there's still going to be block removal, but in service of advancing in the direction of a creation that is from a creative orientation. So what do I mean by that? Well, for example, therapy is great because most people aren't fucking talking about their feelings. And you put somebody in front of another person who's got any amount of skill with listening, then that person's nervous system will start to equalize, even out, and release the runoff. They'll start to let go of what they've been stuck with. Mindfulness and equanimity. We learn this in Buddhism. If you pay attention to a stimulus or a sensation without resisting it, that sensation will naturally ease off and dissipate and change and shift. So we're talking about pain in the body. Suffering is pain multiplied by resistance. If you're not willing to be with what's there or to talk about what's there, you're probably resisting it, and thus making it like pushing it into the subconscious and dealing with it in the background and acting sideways. So there's two layers to this healing process. It's like therapy's great, and you could be on a therapy couch for years if it's not something like cognitive behavioral therapy. I stand behind, like, that's good shit. Psychotherapy, I don't know. Let's pump it full of drugs because will get rid of the symptom rather than addressing the underlying cause. Mainstream, let's pump it full of drugs. Let's give them a bunch of surgery after the mainstream has also taught them to eat processed foods and carbonated beverages and all this. Like, there's a whole conversation there. Health and vitality is part of what we teach in our program. Eating for purpose, eating in alignment with being sexually potent. But anyway, not to go too far down that rabbit hole. Process without outcome is my biggest concern with most self-development modalities. It's like they're always processing. Feel your feelings. Express what's there. Like, great. Now what do you do with that? What's the where are you going now? And if we can get somebody into what we call a true choice, a choice that comes not from the wound, but from their wholeness, then that's the leverage. That's the direction. That's the purpose behind the healing work, is to clear this, not to reinforce a wounded ego on a treadmill of fixing itself and working on itself forever because it thinks it's a problem that it needs to fix, but rather stepping off the treadmill, saying, who would I be if I was already capable of having what I want? And the ego, by the nature of its shape and the shape of its nature, will intrinsically never want to focus on there. It always look for excuses to default back to oscillation, back to being on the treadmill, back to, chasing its tail.
Right.
So what it takes is time, energy, and patience. Once the resistance is released to taking the new actions from that new identity and putting the focus on the new identity long enough consistently so that you're simply that different being. You're not doing all the work. And I saw this, man. I saw this in, because I didn't normalize my social skills until I was doing Empowering Austin Now, until I was doing day-long events. And I had a structure, a creative structure rather than an oscillating structure. An oscillating structure is you take 2 steps forward, you take 1 step back, because your identity will have to die if you keep the result that you created. Your identity of I'm not good enough. Well, how can I be good enough? I have this, or you'll lose the results you've created because the identity needs to survive. And I had that happen too. I would get amazing experiences of sex and romance, but then I would slingshot back into the sense that I wasn't good enough because I went through 5 months of getting phone numbers and the skills weren't working out for me. This is back in 2014, 2015. So it wasn't until it's not until people put themselves in a creative structure where, for example, I have people put their focus on what they want to create and what actions they need to take to be in that and stay in that every day inside of my business coaching. We're still adapting and evolving it to integrate inside of Make Love Easy.
Okay.
But, yeah, that's another fundamental distinction between what we do and what everybody else out there is doing. Is like they're healing for the purpose of healing and hoping that someday maybe they'll get to where they want to go. Whereas we say, where do you want to go? Okay, who do you need to be to have that? And how do you step into being that and taking actions from the being that gets to have that? Subtle, but does it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that approach is, I really like the encouragement message behind it first, and it's sort of an encompass. Like it's trying to roll in all the things, right? You were talking about. It's like, okay, we're trying to roll in the emotional encouragement and support, and then we're even trying to do we're trying to encourage like better eating habits. And dude, I really like it's like we're trying to be an all-in-one because they are all one. Like it's all sort of connected. To have all those things a part of a lifestyle, because I think one of the biggest things that, again, I had trouble with it in my, sort of going into to like pick up stuff like 15 or was it whenever 2009 and 8 was, however many years ago that was, 14, 13 years ago. Like one of my problems looking back on it again, it's just like, it's just superficial. Like there was nothing I got fixed. I learned some fire pickup lines. I learned some or techniques, right? Because there wasn't lines. It was like techniques and strategies and the negging and Kino escalation. Bro, I remember all this shit. I shouldn't remember any of this, but I learned some cool stuff. But what I never learned was like, I fell into that oscillating. Like when you say that, I'm like, I remember doing that. Like some nights if I was on and I'd get numbers and like set up dates, whatever, because I was never good with women. Like that's typically why people were doing this. Like, right. Like they were probably never good at some point. They're coming from a place of like, I'm hurt and like, I don't want to be hurt anymore, but I want to fix this problem in a sense of like, I just want to make this better. And this is at that point in your life, you're like, this is an answer for me. And so you do oscillate. When you're not on, you come back and you're like, I'm stupid. Like the women didn't like me because of this. And I equate it to, I had a friend of mine ask me one day at a work event. I told the story before, and I really like it because it really does encompass like the bigger idea of what it takes to have that inner work done. Is he was like, how what would be like advice that you'd have for somebody who's like looking to go on dates or looking to talk with women? And I was like, I'll say this, man, like best thing I would say to do is build up your house, build up your foundation. And I'm like, that's probably not what you wanted to hear, but I'm like, let me explain. Like, I was like, you could go out, you could, be like, hey, I'm going to go try and talk to this beautiful girl. Or like, even if you want to make friends, first of all, and like they reject you, if you come back to your internal house and it's crappy, the tiles are all messed up, the TV's broken, like rug is everywhere. Like it's just crappy. Like you're not going to like what you come home to. Mm-hmm. But if you have taken the work to like revamp your house and like you keep everything tidy and like you everything that when you come back to it, regardless of what happens outside of your mental house, like whatever, you come back and you're like, but I like this place. I like who I am. I like what's going on. I could be here all day and this is absolutely fine. I don't need to add more to this for it to be absolutely fine. You got to create a base level. And when you have that base level, no matter what happens, no matter what happens after that, you're never going to be less than that base level. And where that base level is, that's a pretty dope person. It's a pretty dope place to be. So when I hear you describe the way that your program is, or the way that your approach is, it's a very foundation and structure based plan first to create this base level of like, here's all these things that are out there, and here's what they're not addressing, and here's what we'd really like to address to make this space, your mental space, your emotional space. Because once that, like for me, like once you have that foundation, once you have that baseline, it makes, I was like, bro, I could go out and like try to like talk to whatever women and get rejected 1,100 times. It would suck, whatever. But like, I would come back and I'd be like, but I am still awesome. Like I'm still cool. Like I'm still happy with the person that I am. That doesn't, conditions don't dictate how I view myself.
Yep.
Because I already view myself as like, I'm a great person.
Yeah, this is so good. This is so important. Going back to the spirituality conversation, the Science of Enlightenment by Shinzen Young, science scholar and Buddhist monk, he talks about the ultimate aim of meditation, the ultimate reason for practicing mysticism is to attain inside yourself a happiness independent of conditions, independent of physical conditions. He talks about getting myxedema madness, where he literally, the amount of glucose in his brain was so reduced to where he could not formulate a thought, but he still had happiness because he cultivated it through his spiritual practice with meditation.
Wow.
And it's like, that's the best house to build right there, in my estimation, because then you don't fucking need pussy. You don't need your relationship. You don't need that date or that validation. You don't worry about that rejection. You don't worry about that job or that economy.
Yeah.
You've got a fundamental space that grounds you beyond anything and anyone else on the planet. So
yeah, it's I love that. I think that's very parallel to exactly like how I try to operate, and when I talk to people about dating and relationships, like where I try to come from to like, one, come from a space of like healing, but come from a space of like love, right? And I use the word healing a lot, and like it's again, it's in the sense of just trying to be the best version of you that you can be at that point, man.
Totally. And I hear that. I love the idea of a healing journey too.
Yeah.
I resonate with that. And I certainly win on that. And I certainly have had partnerships and situations that fed that. And all of my past partners that I had before this relationship that I've got, that I'm blissed out in right now, is all of those were mirrors showing me where there was to go to work and what there was to do, what there was to let go of and move into deeper harmony with inside myself. And like, you know, it's stepping stones. Every relationship increasingly has gotten better and better over time for me. It's been a growth trajectory. So yeah, healing is a great frame. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Say, so long as it's stuck on the treadmill, right, or they're chasing their tail within it.
Yeah, I do, and I do think that like it's the same. I mean, again, I use it. I think that's a great place to approach it from. It's a great frame, right? Because like so many people can go to therapy or can do whatever work like you were describing, pay all the monies to all the people's, whether it's you know, a coaching sense, a counseling, whatever sense you want to spend it on, and never get better. Because it's I think for me, the observation is like, one, like people, I don't know how vulnerable and how honest and how self-realization, that's not a real word, but how much they get to like look at themselves and be self-aware and self-realize like, hey, like here are these aspects. And then when you're even there, it's about putting in the work. And then even when you're there, it's about not trying to do the thing that you previously did or not creating a game plan. Right. And this is part of the things that I enjoyed. I didn't do the full programs, but just as an observational person in seeing somebody like Steve Maeda. And he sent me over some of his programs. I was just like, I had a lot of questions, and not like from like, hey, like I really want to join this program, but I'm like, just in the sense of like, what were we talking about? Like, what were you talking about? He's like, let me send you over the programs. That way you can you get an eyeball, like we can have another conversation about it. I was like, totally cool. And like some of the programs that he has, it's like, it's similar to what I ask for when I would at the end of therapy. Like, I'm always like, okay, doc, what do you want me to do between now and the next time that you see me? Like, what's something that you want me to read a book? You want me to like write down what you want me to do? It's that I like that in programs like that he had. It had questions, and it had like, here's, answer this, like these three, list these three things, or like, what are three reasons why yada yada is not yada yada, or what we can, what you'd like to see better, do, whatever the question is, right? But it's putting down a game plan of like how to not make the same mistake from before. Yep. And people can use the terminology, I think healing, or use the terminology of like, I want to just like grow and like do better. But like, are you doing better? Are you healing? Are we working towards making things better?
Yeah, it's about measuring the outcomes and the results of the actions taken, and being mindful so that someone's on a continual growth trajectory of receiving feedback from, is this coach training, therapy, whatever, actually moving the needle? Is it producing the result or not? And that's what's great about coaching is like, if you aren't people come to me and pay me thousands of dollars because I have the recipe for them to produce a result. Mm-hmm. They may not use that recipe or be fully teachable with that recipe, but it's entirely result oriented and results and performance based. Whereas there's lots of trainings and stuff out there that you can do that'll make you feel better. It'll make you feel like you learned a thing. It'll help you cope better with what you did. And I'm not saying there aren't trainings that that everybody on the planet should do, like Awaken Life Live or the Landmark Forum. I used to joke that everybody should get a license to be human, and they should get it by doing these trainings. I'm not that arrogant anymore, but I will quote myself.
That's funny.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I mean, again, having a like a sort of target, having the goalposts be set, and it's no different than what like you do at work or you do in the gym. Like, we do it for all these other things, but like, I think when it comes to mental and emotional health, like, how many people are walking around like, you know what, I'm going to hit this goal of like, because it's so different, because it's not, I think to your point, you were saying, you had mentioned this earlier, like, there are things we're just not taught. So if we're not taught about the subject, how would we be taught about how to measure the subject when we see something to improve upon? It becomes a lot more harder. It's not hard when you start to dig in, and I can, like, again, I was saying, I look back on myself 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago, a year ago, like 6 months ago, like I see an ever changing and ever growing a evolution, like a Pokemon, just keep, evolving to the next version, the next version, the next version. And it's a beautiful thing to see. But there have been like goals that I've always kept in my mind of like, for these next 3 months, I want to not make this decision, or I want to not do this, or I want to monitor myself in this way. And whatever it is to anybody, like whether you have a coach like helping you out in this manner, whether whatever mental, emotional health person that you have helping you in a sort of sense to set what that goalpost is, I think it's super important, because then you're like, I am ever changing. And when you don't set that, are you? Because what are you measuring? We have no clue. And then when you don't have a goal, and somebody's just going to the gym, they don't have a goal. Like, what does things might have gotten done, but do you know what got done? Like, are we not really? And like, I feel like those people are like typically ones that when you don't have the goal, typically you don't get to an end result of a goal place. And then the people that do tend to get there.
It's difficult to hit a target that you don't aim at or clarify.
Yeah. You get it. My man got it. Yes, exactly that. Mm-hmm. It's tough to hit an invisible target. Absolutely. But I'm a super like avid, just like conversationalist or it's funny. I use the word, I had a friend of mine, like, he's like, so how's the podcast going? And yada, yada. And I'm like, it's going great, man. They're like, so you're like some sort of dating guru or whatever. I'm like, they're like relationship, and I'm like, I'm not a guru. I'm not an expert. I'm a person who asks a question. So I'd say dating philosopher, relationship philosopher. Like I just like to ask questions, and like I like to just like I have an idea of things, but I bring people on so that way I'm expanding the world in these idea of things because I don't have a whole bunch of answers. I just have a lot of questions. I'm genuinely curious about all these different methods and different things that people are doing to help people.
Well, here's the thing. We're taught in school to sit down, shut up, have the right answers, and fill in the test blank.
Right.
Like, that we're taught that the answers are more important than the questions. And what actually really works to be effective, to be fulfilled, is to live in an inquiry, is to live inside of or live or dance with questions. I think it was Aleister Crowley, of all people, who said, I slept with faith and found her dead in the morning. I drank and danced all night with doubt and found her a virgin upon awakening. Like, and I don't often quote fucking.
I was gonna say Aleister Crowley, of all people.
I not often quote him, but he's part of my lineage. Like, it's part of what I was exposed to that got me into the world of the woo. Don't necessarily recommend his work, but anyway, it's about being in an inquiry, being in that dance, and I applaud the dating philosopher angle. That's great.
I feel like it's only most appropriate and most accurate. Like I'm just a person with questions who has his own experiences, and sometimes they're relatable. But I want to have these conversations where we can all sort of relate better to one another because we're not taught it, and we're not exposed to it enough as we are. Like people are more exposed to CSI crime dramas than they are to emotional and mental betterment.
Exactly.
Oh man. Louis, a quick question. So you said your book is going to be out in Q4
of 2022. Or 2023, excuse me. I
2020.
wrote it in Q4 of 2022.
You're going to go back in the past and grab it for us. I'm happy about that. When that drops, I'd love to have you back on to just like talk more about it and let people know where they can find it. Because I think, again, if anything, like the exposure to just like the intro to that story, it's sort of the encapsulated version. I love it. I'm here for it. And I think people are too.
Fuck yeah, man. Honored and delighted. I'm definitely here to come back for that. And yeah, I think I used to say for everything else, there's MasterCard. for anything else, come join our group. Like,
yeah,
it's popping. I mean, it is so much fun to serve y'all inside of that.
Absolutely. Well, Louis, as we round this out, let people know one where they can find you, all the moves you guys are making, and what else people can expect from you.
Absolutely.
Take over the show.
Sure, man. So yeah, we have a 3-month program. It's an accelerator for anybody who wants to create the relationship and sex of their dreams. We can take you from anywhere you're at in terms of social skill, health and vitality, relationship skill, emotional intelligence, and have you create the result of your relationship. I know this because I've done it many times. And we also have a free Facebook group where you can come and just enjoy learning about all of this, get really powerful tools. We have much of our best stuff there for free. We occasionally have master classes, live meetups in Austin this Saturday. You're officially invited right now.
Thank you, man.
Enters meetup at Casa de Luz, 6:00, where we practice live heart-centered social dynamics, and I give coaching like old school boot camps, except with a fun, authenticity, hearty twist.
Love it.
Yeah, that was what I always wanted back then. I got one taste of Steve's boot camp, so I was like, I want to do this. I'll do this.
That's so great.
And I hang out on Facebook, to a lesser extent on Instagram. Find me at makeloveeasy.co. Find me at louisbrantmeyer.com, or just look me up on Facebook and friend request, and find the Make Love Easy Mastermind for Men, feel free to join. Yeah,
For
it's
sure.
been an honor and an absolute pleasure. I'm just here sitting in my seat thinking, man, this is what I get to do with my life. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The pleasure is like all on this side of the table, man. I want to thank you just for taking the time to come and do it. Everybody go follow Louis and Make Love Easy. Check out the website. It's makeloveeasy.co. Everybody go follow him, go find him. And if you feel like being a part of the community, join the community. I joined the Facebook group not too long ago. And then I instantly was like, oh, I want this guy on my podcast. I think it's going to be a fun one. So yeah, looking forward to having you on in the future. And everybody, while you're out on Facebook and following Make Love Easy and Louis, you can follow me, Money Blakeweather, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat. You can also follow the podcast Unfiltered Bachelor on all the same social mediums, or you can follow it on your favorite podcast app, iHeartRadio, Spotify, anywhere podcasts are. That is where the show is. Again, go follow Louis. Louis, thank you so much for coming on. And whatever time everybody's listening to this, morning, evening, afternoon, I do appreciate you. And until the next time, we will see you. Peace.
Peace.